Hi, welcome to the first 10 pages. I'm Suzanne Herrera-McCullough.
And I'm Robert L. McCullough. Suzanne and I are both longtime members of the Writers Guild of America, with more than 300 produced film and television credits between us.
We've sold projects in a wide range of formats, everything from individual series, episodes to original pilots and feature film screenplays.
We've even written Bibles and long-running series for online streamers. And every one of those scripts has started with a blank page as we ask ourselves the same question every time. How are we going to start this thing?
For years, writers have come to us for our honest reaction to their scripts, which eventually led us to building an online platform and giving them meaningful feedback to help take their scripts to the professional level.
It started with the Santa Barbara International Screenplay Awards. That's a quarterly competition with some great prizes where we read and analyze every page of every script submitted to us.
Whether it's a full screenplay or a TV script or a script for a short film, every word of every page is read, analyzed, and scored based upon specific criteria used throughout the TV and movie industry.
What we soon discovered is that it's pretty easy to determine if a script is really any good just by reading the first dozen or so pages, and that writers are always interested in getting professional feedback as quickly as possible. And that's when Suzanne came up with the idea for the Wiki screenplay contest.
I always thought that was so unfair. You write your script, the whole script takes us months, years, and then the first 10 pages are the crucial pages.
Right.
At the Wiki, you can get very quick feedback in the major elements of your script, and you only need to submit the first 10 pages of a script to get written feedback from our team of professionals with real industry backgrounds.
Now, you might be wondering, how can anybody decide whether or not a script is any good just by reading the first 10 pages? Well, in the professional marketplace, that's exactly what happens. The first 10 pages of a script need to answer several specific questions very quickly.
Keep in mind the fact that agents, managers, producers, and studio development execs have a lot of scripts to read. Give them any excuse to set your script aside so they can move on to the next one, and they will.
Well, as the saying goes, you only have one chance to make a first impression. And the same is true about your script. First impressions are everything. So let's briefly talk about what your first 10 pages need to really show the reader.
First, you have to help the reader to quickly understand what kind of movie or TV show this is. The first page should establish the tone. Is it a comedy, a horror film, or an action thriller? The tone of your writing needs to reflect the premise of the story you're telling, and that tone needs to be fairly consistent in all that follows.
Right. One of the ways to do that before you even begin writing fade in is to write a tight, succinct log line, which is practically an art unto itself, and we've covered in other webinars, because your log line is really for you as you begin writing your script. It becomes kind of your home base when you start writing scenes and dialogue.
Once you have your log line, which should clearly define your genre, premise, and tone, then you need to start building a hook, something that catches the reader's attention and hopefully keeps it.
That's where the title can be a critical element. After all, it's the first words a reader encounters. Your title sets the tone and gives some indication of where the story might go.
It's pretty obvious that a movie title like Titanic isn't going to be a comedy, right? The particular title is practically the whole movie.
In the case of Titanic, for example, the movie opens with an introduction to our protagonists, and we have a clear indication this is going to be a love story, kind of another retelling of Romeo and Juliet. So the intention of that film was really apparent quite early, and it remained consistent throughout all the action that followed.
We knew within the first 10 to 15 minutes that Titanic was going to be about how Jack would move heaven and earth to get together with Rose.
That somewhat strategic brilliance of that script is that James Cameron created major co-protagonist roles that attracted great talent, as well as the big-time financing required to make that movie.
So keep that in mind. Your first 10 pages should clearly establish a protagonist we care about and whom an actor would want to portray.
So far, we've got two major elements to look for in your first 10 pages. A writing tone consistent with the movie's genre and premise, and the introduction of a protagonist who has a clear agenda. Now, let's talk about really making the first impression with the craft of your writing?
Okay, first you have to make sure your script is written in industry standard formatting. One of the best ways to do that is to use screenwriting software. It's not cheap, but without it, you'll be guessing about margins, line spacing, capitalization, and other basic stuff.
We see a lot of scripts that have poor formatting, and it's really one of the major things that knocks the script out of contention. So we won't go into the formatting details here, but if you need help in that department, I've got a little book. Well, here it is. I'll hold it up. We have a little book, Stop Screwing Around and Format Your Screenplay Like a Pro. It really deals specifically with formatting issues. It's the third installment in what I call the Stop Screwing Around and Write series. These are little books that lay out in a very concise, step-by-step way what it takes to write a marketable script.
It's really quick reading.
Very quick reading. The books aren't very long. This one is only 120 pages, and it gives you all the answers you need. With respect to that. So the bottom line is your script has to look and feel professional the minute somebody picks it up.
So remember, people in the industry are constantly reading scripts, and you don't want to give them any reason to stop reading the script.
Which means you need to use the correct font, eliminate typos, and write with perfect grammar. The key to all of that, of course, is proofreading very carefully.
We've actually seen scripts with great storylines and dialogue go nowhere just because of poor spelling and sloppy formatting.
Your script makes an impression on readers before they even open it, which is why you need to be very careful about what goes on your cover page.
You only need 3 things on your cover page: the title of your script, your name, and your contact information. Just your email address or phone number are enough. Don't put WGA registration number or a copyright warning on the cover. You'll only give a reader the impression that you're ready to sue anyone who steals your precious idea. Not a great way to integrate yourself with a reader.
Of course, protecting your work is important, and copywriting it and registering it with the DGA are smart moves. I mean, copyright is the ultra legal form of protection, and the Writers Guild registration, it serves as a helpful backup. But professional screenwriters do not plaster this information on their covers. It just comes across as kind of adversarial.
The thing is, any WGA registration or copyright is valid within its indicated on the cover or not, and everyone in the industry knows it. By putting it on the cover, it's like you're expecting people to try and steal your script, and you're warning them not to. That's not the friendliest way to approach people when you want them to like your work.
So a reader opens your script and looks at the very first page. And the last thing you want to do is scare them off with long blocks of stage directions or detailed descriptions of actions. The reality is nobody wants to read long paragraphs of anything, and big blocks of uninterrupted text are a pain to read.
So instead of focusing on the story itself, your reader will pay too much attention to how it's being told. It always shows that the writer doesn't know how to pace a story on the page, which is crucial in good screenwriting.
Ideally, the story should be presented in a way that reflects how it plays on screen. A series of brief paragraphs, 3 or 4 lines each, creates a quick and energetic reading experience.
White space is a good thing in your opening pages because that means you've got your characters front and center and talking to each other.
You want to get your protagonist front and center as soon as possible and make something happen as soon as possible. You want to get the reader into the protagonist's problems so that the reader is engaged with your characters and the overall premise of the story that follows.
But when we say something needs to happen in the early pages, that doesn't necessarily mean a car chase, but something meaningful or possibly shocking.
It's always a good sign when something interesting or surprising happens in the first 5 or 10 pages of the script, whether it's a funny moment, an action sequence, or a mysterious event. A strong opening always grabs attention and sets the tone for what's to come.
These early pages are where you want your dialogue as concise and to the point as possible. Remember, you're writing for a visual medium, so write visually and create imaginary in the reader's mind.
Right. You want that imagery to really kind of jump off the page. So, and writing visually doesn't mean you pepper your scenes with camera directions or acting cues. Those are obvious signs, really, that you're trying to be the director and not just the writer. So just for a quick review, here are our top 10 tips really for your first 10 pages.
Okay, number one, don't scare the reader off with all kinds of copyright or WGA registration warnings on the cover. Just your title, the writer's name, and contact information. That's it.
Number two, don't include your log line on the cover or on the first page of your script. We see that all the time because what happens is if you tell the reader what it's all about right up front, they realize they don't really need to read your whole script.
Number three, set the appropriate tone with your writing. A comedy script, for example, should read differently from a suspense thriller, simply in terms of the way the writing sounds.
Right. Number four, set up as much as possible in your very first scene. Think of that opening scene really as your statement of intent, the thing that tells readers everything they need to know to make them care about everything that follows. Whatever you do, don't confuse the reader with an unclear message about the genre of your overall premise.
And sometimes that's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not easy at all. That's why screenwriting is such a challenge.
It takes practice. Number five, break up your stage directions. Avoid big blocks of dense text and the tendency to describe everything with too much detail. Professional readers, and this includes managers, agents, directors, and actors, have read a lot of scripts, and they will get your scene without you over describing the sets or the characters.
And number six, try to start things with some sort of action in the first 10 pages. That means dramatic action, some sort of conflict between the characters that really pulls us into the story. Car chases and shootouts are always fun, but what counts is the why things are happening.
But that doesn't mean you should have a long scene with characters just talking either. And certainly avoid opening a movie with a long, ponderous monologue that goes on for a page or more. That's a sure sign that you're delivering exposition and story points that should be dramatized rather than told.
Number eight, don't write a bunch of camera directions or include editing directions. Remember, you're the writer, not the director. A script that reads like a shot list and involves angles, cuts, and camera movements will quickly get tossed aside. Why? Because they make the story so hard to follow.
But as a writer,
I know the tendency is to control everything.
Is to control everything, to write every little nuance that you want to happen.
When I have live consultations with writers, and that's something you can sign up for on our website. When I have live consultations, the number one thing I find in writers is they don't trust anybody else to get what they're saying. Well, believe me, people that read scripts have read a lot of scripts. So you need to trust the actors, the directors, the prop men. They'll understand what you're saying. You don't have to over describe stuff.
But your script is your baby.
Right. So number nine.
Number nine, as much as possible, write as visually as possible. Make your readers feel like they're actually seeing your movie and not just reading about it.
Right. And the last tip from us is by page 10, be sure you have the reader wondering what happens next. You want them to turn to page 11 and 12 and the rest of your script.
Writing a script, whether it's for a feature film or a TV show or for a short film, is not like any other kind of writing. Scripts are not written for the general reader who enjoys the occasional novel or short story. Scripts are written for a very specific and uniquely demanding audience, which demands a high degree of specific professionalism.
And that's why one of the best places to start really is at the Wiki Screenplay contest. It's the original online script competition where you only need to submit the first 10 pages of your script and where you will get very fast feedback from very experienced industry professionals.
Now known as the world's fastest screenplay contest, it's a new contest every 30 days with some cash value and 4 levels of fast ethical feedback.
And you can send us a completed script or just your first 10 pages. Whatever you send us, it'll be read by a team of seasoned analysts and judges, all of whom are working industry professionals. We don't use any interns or unpaid readers, people who've never written anything.
Right. At the Wiki, you'll never have to wait 3 months or 6 months or even longer to find out if your script is on the right track.
And when you enter at the feedback level, you're guaranteed to get the kind of help that will quickly bring your script up to professional standards. That's the whole purpose of the contest, really, is to help writers generate material that they can actually sell.
This is what we love to do. We love to help writers improve their scripts.
Right.
Okay, I see we have a lot of questions from a lot of people. So let's do the first one.
All right. Hang on here. Let me get the Q&A. Okay, Maria asks, I'm starting a writing program for the community. Would we be interested in helping turn them into movies? Amazon is helping me publish their books, and we'll also do this. Well, Maria, we would love to help you, but we have so many writers we're working with on a constant basis, particularly in the live consultations. And we don't really posture ourselves as managers, agents, or really producers of other people's material. We have plenty of our own projects. So I think it's fabulous that you're starting a writing program for the community. But I would suggest that you have everybody get some positive and professional feedback on their work before you think about turning them into movies.
And in terms of helping your community, if maybe we can help in the educational area about how to write a great script, and we would love to help writers. Just contact us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So
number 2, this is from Elron. When it comes to dialogue, is grammar and spelling important? I ask because each character has their own personality and grammar defects. Oh, absolutely. It's important.
Well, it's the writing. In your writing, your grammar and spelling needs to be perfect. You want to be very careful in dialogue to avoid indicating vernacular. Simply when you introduce the characters initially, simply say they speak with a Southern patois or with a Brooklyn accent or a Bostonian accent, that sort of thing. You don't need to indicate in dialogue those grammar defects in which people speak. You'll have to, again, that's part of the trust issue.
Right.
The actors will bring that.
Also, spelling is huge, basically because it gives the impression right away that you're not a good writer, whether you are or not. A misspelled word, as small as it seems, is really important. It'll stand out in the writer's mind, and you just want them to keep reading and not stop and say, oh, this word is misspelled.
Right. Alron has another question. What was tip number 7? Alron, tip number 7 had to do with avoiding long, ponderous monologue to introduce a character. Don't let any dialogue go more than several lines initially in your first 10 pages.
And this is not to say that we have not all seen movies that start out that way. Very few movies are made that start out that way, and the ones that are generally are made by very, very famous producer writers that can get away with it, and usually ends up being a good movie. But when you first start out, you need to keep it short.
Right. Make it easy to read.
Right.
So, Todd.
Yeah.
He says, not sure I can write a screenplay. Can you sell a story treatment? Well, that's tough because everybody's got an idea, Todd. It's really the way the idea is expressed through the screenplay. That's what sells. Simply having pitches with nothing to back it up, unless, as Suzanne said, you're an established professional with a long track record of basically hit movies.
Yeah. Well, it is very common for, like Bob said, you're an established writer, and then that writer, as in Alan Sorkin, can go into any studio and say, I have a great idea. And he gives, a paragraph, a pitch, and they can say, that's great, or how about, but he wouldn't even be able to get the meeting to pitch anything if he wasn't a name. So you're better off trying to write a screenplay.
But I do want to say, you say you're not sure you can write a screenplay. Trust me, anybody can write a screenplay if they learn how to do it. And that's really the purpose of these webinars and the purpose of the books I've written. Because, we started out never having written the script, and we just, learned the process. It wasn't easy. It took some time.
Right.
I wrote for 10 years before I sold anything.
Some people take classes. Some people read books on how to write a screenplay. If you're passionate about your story, you can find a way to write the screenplay, and you can also get a partner to help you write a screenplay. And then you both are writers on your script. So don't give up.
Right. It can be done. If we've done it, you can do it. Believe me.
This is from Steve. Hi, Robert and Suzanne. Thank you so much for your talk tonight. My time. Oh, any comments about how overseas writers, I'm in the UK, should think about pushing their work in the US? Is it better to focus on the domestic markets?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Obviously, the United Kingdom, Great Britain has its own very flourishing film and television market. I would certainly start there, Steve. It's interesting, though, there are a lot of people in the Commonwealth countries, if you would say, who sell material to Hollywood. Australian writers are very active. Obviously, New Zealand has become a hotbed of production. I think it's the same process for you, no matter where you are. The great thing about the internet today is you have access to everybody. And I wouldn't consider that a handicap at all.
Steve, if I were you, I would try and market to both countries
Absolutely.
at the same time.
And focus on the script. It's
Mhm.
always about the writing. It's always about the writing. So Sheila wants to know, can you please repeat number 9?
Sure. As much as possible, don't forget to write visually. Make your readers feel like they're actually seeing the movie. So it's about writing, not telling them how the movie should be shot.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And here's Colleen. Hi, Colleen. I've heard from Colleen quite a bit recently. She asked, what's the conflict in the first 10 pages? What if the conflict in the first 10 pages is not the actual or bigger conflict that the protagonist finds himself in later? Well, that's called a reverse.
And that's okay.
It's okay, but boy, that initial conflict better be strong enough to sustain what follows in some fashion. Otherwise, you're talking about 2 different movies, basically.
You just have to make it interesting and tie it up.
Right. I think what you're talking about, I hope what you're talking about is the fact that things need to escalate constantly for your protagonist. Once the problem is solved, say in the first 5 or 10 pages, there has to be a bigger permutation of that problem.
And it has to eventually all come together towards the end. And then that's your aha moment, like, oh, that's what she was talking about.
Right, right. Hey, Kevin has a great question. He says, I did the Wiki 10-page review and wanted to let you know how valuable the feedback. Well, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
We try. There were no attaboys. No, that's not the business we're in, really. We're in the business of helping you, not praising you constantly. And the critic brought focus and reminded me of what the spine of the story is. Can I resubmit? Well, of course you can resubmit, particularly if you do it within the first 30 days. We're happy to look at it and rescore it and give you some more feedback. So yeah, certainly send that to us.
Just keep in mind, a lot of screenplay contests offer managers and agents. That is not what we do. We try very, very hard to make your scripts as perfect as possible so you can be ready to submit them and get you that first job.
Right. So we're up against the clock here. We have a couple more questions to deal with. Jump in here, Suzanne.
Okay. You said something about white space. But what if my opening scenes doesn't have any dialogue in them?
Well, if it's a pure movie, if it's all visuals, just be sure you break those stage directions up in those descriptions. Break them up into 3 and 4 lines.
You know, dialogue, you don't have to have dialogue for it to be exciting the first 10 pages. Of course, it seems a little easier, but, you know, it can still be visual without anybody talking.
Right. And Jason asks, he says, I got feedback from a contest saying my script is too long. It's 135 pages, but I see a lot of scripts that are over 120 pages. Well, Jason, that's true. You will see a lot of scripts that are too long. Anything over 120 pages in our book is a very difficult script to sell. That's because think of the economics, right? Every page has to be shot. That means the budget is growing with every page. Generally, a script should be between 90 and 115 pages in our view, in our experience, because that's an easier script to sell simply because of the budget. If I see a script that's 135 pages, that tells me that the writer hasn't done much rewriting or self-editing. And it requires a lot of discipline to do that. You do want to kill your babies sometimes.
But again, I always go back to this. You will see movies that are very long, and people will see scripts that are very long, but generally it's from established writers.
Exactly.
And you want to get in there, and then you can write as long as you want once you establish yourself.
Right.
Again, we have another question and we can reiterate this. The question is, I know the story I want to write about, but I've never written an actual screenplay. Should I take a course to learn how? Of course.
Why not?
Yes, there's so many different avenues, a lot of online courses. You can actually go in person and take courses. You can read some of Bob's books. They're a great start. And just, you can also access a lot of scripts online.
Right.
It used to be when Bob and I started out, Bob would have to steal a script from the studio and then
I'm
read,
guilty.
and then we used to read it, and then he used to sneak it back and put it on the producer's desk, because no one was allowed to read the script or take it from the studio.
Yeah, I think the best education you can get, frankly, is read as many screenplays as possible. Read the good scripts. Go to the AFI.org, I think, AFI.org. They have a list of the best 100 movies of all time. Read those screenplays.
Thank you so much for joining us. We are here to help. And just remember, we want to make your script a better script. Take care. Bye-bye.